The young woman across the boardroom table smiled with effortless confidence as she slid her resume toward me. "I've always believed one thing," she said. "Companies stop growing the moment they let people stay in power for too long." Several executives around the table nodded politely. She continued, "Fresh minds build the future. Experience is valuable, but eventually, every generation has to step aside." Nobody noticed my hand tighten around the fountain pen resting on my leather notebook. Nobody except me. Because 25 years earlier, her mother had looked me in the eyes, smiled almost the exact same way, and said nearly the same words, less than a week before she stole my husband. The young woman sitting across from me had no idea who I was. She believed she was interviewing for the biggest promotion of her career. She had no idea she was sitting inside a company built from the ruins of the family her mother helped destroy. 25 years earlier, my name wasn't printed in financial magazines. Nobody on Wall Street had ever heard of Evelyn Carter. I wasn't an investor. I wasn't a CEO. I wasn't even ambitious. I was simply a wife who believed loyalty still meant something. Back then, my world fit inside a quiet neighborhood in Greenwich, Connecticut. A white colonial home, a small vegetable garden, Saturday morning farmers' markets, and family dinners around an old oak table that Richard and I had built together during our first summer of marriage. Life wasn't glamorous. It was real. Richard Carter worked as a regional sales director for a growing medical technology company based in Stamford. I taught accounting at a community college and occasionally helped local businesses organize their finances. Our son Daniel was 12, bright, curious. The kind of child who still hugged his parents before leaving for school. Looking back, I often ask myself the same question. When did Richard stop being my husband and start becoming a stranger? It wasn't one dramatic moment. It happened slowly, almost invisibly. Business trips became longer. His phone was never far from his hand. He suddenly cared about designer watches, luxury restaurants, and country clubs where membership cost more than our yearly mortgage. Whenever I asked if something was wrong, he smiled. "You worry too much, Evelyn." I wanted to believe him. Love has a dangerous habit of making intelligent people ignore obvious truths. Then came the charity gala. Every year Richard's company hosted a fundraising dinner in downtown Manhattan. Spouses were invited. I almost didn't go. Daniel had a school science competition the next morning, and I wanted to stay home. Richard insisted, "It'll only be a few hours." That decision changed my life. The ballroom overlooked the Manhattan skyline. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above hundreds of perfectly dressed guests. I felt out of place in my simple navy blue dress. Most women wore designer gowns worth more than my car. That's where I met Victoria Ashford. She entered the room like someone who expected every conversation to stop for her. Tall, elegant. Perfectly tailored white evening gown, diamond earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head. She introduced herself with a warm smile. "I'm Victoria. I've heard so much about you." There was something strange about the way she said it, as though she already knew me long before we had ever met. During dinner, I noticed Richard watching her. Not once, not twice, constantly. Every time she laughed, his eyes followed her. Every time she crossed the ballroom, he somehow found a reason to be nearby. My stomach tightened. I told myself I was imagining things. I was. When the evening ended, Victoria hugged me goodbye. Then she leaned close enough that only I could hear her. "You seem like a very kind woman." I smiled politely. "Thank you," she smiled back. "But kindness rarely keeps successful men." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood her. Before I could respond, she walked away. I watched Richard staring after her. That was the first night I couldn't sleep. Over the next several months, Richard changed, not dramatically. Just enough that every small change felt impossible to explain. He missed Daniel's baseball games, forgot birthdays, canceled weekend trips. He was physically present, but emotionally somewhere else. One rainy Thursday evening, he walked through our front door carrying 2 expensive leather suitcases. He didn't kiss me. He didn't ask about dinner. He simply stood in the hallway. "We need to talk." Those 4 words have ended more marriages than infidelity itself. I turned off the stove, sat across from him, and waited. There isn't an easy way to say this. His voice was calm, too calm. I've fallen in love with someone else. The room became perfectly silent. Outside, rain tapped softly against the kitchen windows. Inside, 20 years of marriage collapsed into a single sentence. Who is she? Even before he answered, part of me already knew. Victoria. Of course it was. He didn't apologize, he didn't cry. Instead, he said something I will never forget. She understands the future I want. I looked around our home, the photographs, the wedding picture above the fireplace, Daniel's science trophies. The blanket my mother had sewn before she passed away. So this, I whispered, was never enough. Richard looked down at the floor. I've outgrown this life. No, he hadn't outgrown his life. He had outgrown his gratitude. 2 weeks later, Richard moved into Victoria's mansion in Westchester County, New York. 3 months later, the divorce was finalized. Everything happened quietly. Almost professionally. Until the morning, Daniel found the wedding invitations sitting inside our mailbox. Richard wanted his own son at the ceremony. Daniel stared at the envelope for nearly a minute. Then he placed it back on the kitchen table. I'm staying with you. I never asked him to choose. Children usually understand betrayal long before adults admit it exists. That Saturday, while Richard married Victoria inside a luxury country club overlooking the Hudson River, Daniel and I drove to Mystic, Connecticut. We spent the afternoon walking along the harbor, eating lobster rolls from a tiny seafood shack and watching sailboats drift across the water. As the sun began setting, Daniel quietly looked at me. Mom, are we going to be okay? I wrapped my arm around his shoulder and smiled, not because I knew the answer, but because he needed me to believe it. One day, I told him, they'll remember what they chose. At the time, I had no idea life was already preparing that day. For the next several years, I stopped asking one question: why did this happen to me? Instead, every morning, I asked a different one. What am I going to build today? Grief has an unusual way of sharpening your vision. The things that once felt important stopped mattering. Designer clothes, luxury cars, country clubs, none of them could pay a mortgage. None of them could raise a child. None of them could rebuild a broken life. So I focused on the only thing nobody could take from me, my mind. I rented a tiny office in Stamford, Connecticut. It sat above an old Italian bakery that filled the hallway with the smell of fresh bread every morning. The office had one desk, 2 folding chairs, a second-hand filing cabinet, and a coffee machine that worked most days. I named the business Carter Financial Advisory. It wasn't glamorous. Most mornings I answered my own phones, filed my own paperwork, met clients, and then cleaned the office before going home. Daniel often sat in the corner doing homework while I finished tax reports late into the evening. Sometimes, he would fall asleep on the office couch. I'd cover him with my coat, turn off the lights, and keep working. Failure wasn't an option. I didn't have investors. I didn't have wealthy parents. I had one son who was watching everything I did. 3 years later, a local manufacturing company hired me to help prevent bankruptcy. Everyone else believed the company was finished. I didn't. The numbers told a different story. 6 months later, the company recovered. The owner recommended me to another business. Then another. Soon, banks began calling. Law firms referred clients. Private investors asked for meetings. Without realizing it, my tiny consulting office became one of Connecticut's fastest-growing financial advisory firms. 15 years passed, then 20. Eventually, Carter Financial Advisory evolved into something much larger, Carter Capital Partners. A private investment company headquartered in Manhattan, with satellite offices in Boston, Chicago, and Charlotte. We specialized in rescuing struggling family-owned businesses. Not destroying them, saving them, maybe because I knew exactly what it felt like to lose everything. By the time I turned 62, business magazines called me the quiet closer. Not because I was ruthless, but because I never made decisions with emotion. I made them with facts. There was one rule every executive inside my company knew: never judge anyone by appearances. Nobody understood why I repeated that rule so often. Only I knew. My executive assistant, Lauren, knocked gently on my office door. Ms. Carter, yes, your final interview candidate has arrived. I looked toward the skyline outside my office. Lower Manhattan shimmered beneath the afternoon sun. What position? Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions. I nodded. Bring her in. Lauren hesitated. Actually, she requested a full board interview. That caught my attention. Confident, Lauren smiled. Very. 30 seconds later, the boardroom doors opened. A young woman stepped inside wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit. Confident posture, perfect smile, expensive watch, designer handbag. She looked unbelievably familiar. Good afternoon, she smiled. My name is Olivia Ashford. Ashford, there it was again. The name I hadn't spoken aloud in 25 years. I remained perfectly still. She never recognized me. Why would she? The last time she had seen me, she had been a small child standing beside her mother at a charity gala. The interview began normally. Education, leadership, corporate strategy. Acquisitions, negotiation. Her answers were excellent. The board loved her. Then, one director asked an unexpected question. What do you believe is the biggest mistake family-owned companies make? Olivia smiled confidently. They become emotional. The room remained quiet. She continued. They hold on to people because of loyalty instead of performance. Several board members nodded. Then she added, sometimes founders refuse to step aside simply because they believe the company belongs to them forever. I slowly folded my hands. Interesting, very interesting. She had absolutely no idea she was saying those words inside a company whose founder was sitting directly across from her. The interview ended after 45 minutes. Most executives looked impressed. Lauren collected the resumes. Olivia stood. Thank you all for your time. She turned toward me. You've been very quiet. Finally, the first words I had spoken during the entire interview. I prefer listening before making decisions. She smiled politely. I respect that. Then she asked, what exactly is your role here? The room became completely silent. None of the board members answered because nobody wanted to ruin what happened next. I slowly stood, walked toward the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, and then turned back to face her. My name, I said calmly, is Evelyn Carter. For the first time, her smile faded. Very slightly, almost too quickly to notice. I know, she replied. You're one of the senior partners. I smiled. No, I founded this company. The board works for me. And if I sign one document this afternoon, you'll either begin the biggest opportunity of your career or walk out of this building without a job. For the first time since entering the room. Olivia looked nervous. She had no idea the interview had only just begun. For nearly 10 seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound inside the boardroom was the faint hum of Manhattan traffic beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. Olivia looked from me to the executives and then back to me again. She forced a smile. I didn't realize I was speaking with the founder. You weren't supposed to, I replied calmly. I prefer people to show me who they are before they learn who I am. A few members of the board exchanged quiet glances. They had seen this before. Not many candidates survived my second interview. Lauren slid a thin black folder onto the polished conference table. I pushed it toward Olivia. Open it. She hesitated before lifting the cover. Inside were newspaper clippings, business journals, old charity photographs, and one faded magazine article from 25 years earlier. On the front page, a smiling Richard Carter stood beside Victoria Ashford at a charity gala in Manhattan. Olivia's expression froze. She recognized the photograph instantly. My mother, she whispered. Yes, I nodded. Your mother. Silence filled the room. You knew her? Olivia asked carefully. I did, I answered. Better than she ever realized. She slowly closed the folder. My mother passed away 3 years ago. I know, I attended the memorial. Her eyes widened. You were there, you never saw me. I stayed in the back, I wasn't there for closure. What then? I looked directly into her eyes. I was there because I wanted to remember something. That bitterness eventually destroys the person carrying it. Olivia lowered her gaze. My mother rarely spoke about the past. I imagine she didn't, I replied. People rarely tell stories that make them the villain. She looked genuinely uncomfortable. I don't know what happened between you and my family. You don't, and today isn't about punishing you for it. The room grew still. One director leaned forward. He had been waiting for this moment. So why am I here? Olivia finally asked. I folded my hands. Because your resume is excellent. You graduated from Wharton. You rebuilt 2 struggling companies. You have exceptional recommendations. She looked confused. Then why all of this? I smiled softly. Because character matters just as much as talent. I pressed a button on the conference table. A large screen lit up behind me. Lauren opened a presentation. The first slide appeared, Ashford Family Foundation. The second slide, court records, financial statements, tax filings. The third, news articles. Victoria Ashford's investment company had collapsed 6 years earlier after several reckless acquisitions. Richard had tried to save the business, but he failed. Almost everything they owned had been sold. The mansion, the vacation homes, even the luxury yacht. Olivia stared silently at the screen. I never knew, she whispered. No, I answered. You were in college, your parents protected you, they wanted you to believe everything was still perfect. Tears began forming in her eyes. My father worked 3 jobs after that. I know. I hired one of the companies that employed him. She looked at me in disbelief. You helped him. I helped a business, I corrected gently. I never told them to hire Richard. They simply did, she covered her mouth. You could have destroyed him. I could have, but revenge that destroys innocent people isn't justice. It's just another form of cruelty. I walked toward the window overlooking Manhattan. When Richard left, I believed success would make the pain disappear. It didn't. When your mother's company collapsed, I expected to feel satisfaction. I didn't. The only thing I felt was relief. Relief that I never became the kind of person who measures life by money. I turned back toward Olivia. You are not your mother. And you are certainly not responsible for my failed marriage. She quietly wiped away a tear. Then, why tell me any of this? Because today you stood in this room and judged older people before knowing anything about them. You made the same mistake your mother once made. And I refuse to let history repeat itself. Olivia slowly stood. I'm sorry. No, I interrupted. Don't apologize because you need this job. Apologize only if you've truly learned something. She nodded. I have. For the first time in my life. I understand why my father always said one sentence. What sentence? Real wealth is revealed by how people treat those who can do nothing for them. A quiet smile crossed my face. Your father became a wiser man. He did, she whispered, after losing everything. I picked up the employment contract. The board watched silently. Every executive already knew my decision. I signed my name and slid the contract across the table. Olivia stared at it. I got the job. You earned the job, I answered. But understand something, this company rewards integrity. The day you forget that, you'll leave through the same door every other executive has. She nodded immediately. I understand. No, I smiled. You will. 6 months later, autumn painted Manhattan in shades of gold and crimson. Carter Capital Partners had just completed its largest acquisition in company history. Olivia had become one of the company's most respected vice presidents. Not because of her resume, but because she listened, she learned, and she never again judged someone by age, appearance, or background. Every Friday afternoon, she stopped by my office with 2 cups of coffee. We talked about business, life, mistakes, and second chances. One afternoon, she looked at me and smiled. You know, my mother spent years believing she won. I looked out across the skyline. Sometimes people confuse getting what they want with winning. Real victory isn't taking someone else's happiness, it's building your own. 25 years earlier, one woman laughed as she walked away with my husband. She believed she had taken everything from me. She was wrong. She gave me the greatest gift of my life, a reason to discover the woman I was always capable of becoming, and that no one could ever steal. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to Evelyn Tales and stay with us for more powerful, emotional revenge stories inspired by unforgettable moments, difficult choices, and the strength to rise again. Your next favorite story is just around the corner.